Alrighty, well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrew Doffany. I'm the Instruction and Outreach Librarian at the New Jersey State Library. It's my pleasure to welcome back one of our repeat speakers, Paul Cecala, who is a certified global career development facilitator, a work search author, and founder of Cecala Career Consultants. Since 1999, Paul has assisted over 3,000 job seekers, ranging from C-suite executives to college students. He specializes in creating job search project plans and is recognized for his empathetic listening skills. He currently facilitates job seeker networking groups for 4 different organizations and has helmed the adult professional education program for 2 colleges. He has also been at the helm of a New Jersey Department of Labor's One Stop Career Center. He has his BS in psychology from Florida Institute of Technology and has published 2 books and numerous articles on career coaching in a variety of publications. So, welcome back, Paul. We're really excited to have you. And today you're going to be talking about resume writing, probably one of the hardest things to do when you're trying to find a new career or find a new job. So, I'm really excited to have you back, Paul.
Glad to be here. Thanks. You
Uh,
ready for me to share?
just have a few housekeeping items to
Go
go
ahead.
over. Um, First, we will be taking your questions throughout the program today, so feel free to send them to us at any time using the Q&A or the chat feature in the Zoom dashboard. At the end of the webinar, there will be a survey available, so if you have time, we ask you please complete the survey. We really appreciate any and all feedback that you can give us. And if you want more information about anything related to career development, career advancement, Paul has a fantastic website at secalacareer.com, so I encourage you to explore that at your leisure. And then one last thing I have for you is just a brief overview of the Zoom dashboard. This is what your dashboard should look like if you're using a PC or a Mac. If you're using a mobile device, the dashboard may look a little bit different, but all of the features will still be there. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can check your audio settings. So if you're using an external listening device like a headset or earbuds, you can check to make sure it connected properly there. At any point during the presentation, there is a raise hand button here in the middle. You can click on that and that'll alert me. I will send you a message in Zoom and hopefully be able to resolve any problems that you were having. And then lastly, as I mentioned, if you do have questions, you can use the Q&A or the chat buttons to get in touch with us and we'll be happy to address your questions. All right. That is everything that I have for you. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Beautiful. Thank you. Just give me a second, folks, to get things swapped over here and share my screen. There we go. Let's now. There we go. Got that. And participants, chat. Okay. Now I got everything I need to see. Okay. So glad to be here, and thanks again, as always, for having me, Andrew. It's always great to be here with the folks from the library system, and I'm glad to see so many of you taking advantage of the programs that are offered by the state library system, including your local libraries. You know, the services that are available are just amazing. One of the best ones from a career coaching perspective that I see is the fact that the state library purchases for every public library in the state of New Jersey access to Data Axle's reference solutions database. Doesn't have much to do with our conversation for today, but if you need to figure out who are the organizations that might want to hire you, that's a great resource to have. And I was just talking with a client yesterday who said that the San Diego Public Library does not subscribe to Data Axle, which really boggled my mind because it's a fabulous database. So let's talk more about resumes, though. That's what we're here for today. And I want to just start with the fact that it's just not rocket science. You know, people try and make resumes this big, important deal that's, oh my God, it's got to be absolutely perfect. And, you don't have to. You need to make sure that it speaks to the hiring manager, and I'll come back to that in just a second. Um, Before I forget, though, I think Andrew said this, but I want to say it again. Feel free to take notes, to take screenshots if you really want to. But truthfully, if you reach out to me directly, I will be more than happy to share these slides with you directly. I've put my contact information into the chat section already once. I'll do it again before the end of the presentation. And my last slide has all my contact information, including a QR code. So why do we need resumes in the first place? And the truth is, the value of a resume is to get an interview. Your resume is not going to get you hired. Your resume is not going to convince someone that you're networking with to take action. But the interviewer needs the information on your resume in order to say, yeah, you're the person that I want to talk to further and see if you're the right fit for the job. So we need to wow the reader. I was at a conference in Washington, D.C. just last weekend, and one of the presenters there had said that his research found the average HR person or recruiter, who typically is the first person to see your resume if you're applying online, especially, will spend no more than 6 seconds looking at your resume. And so you've got 6 seconds to figure out how to get their attention and make them want to read more and keep you in the pile to go forward in the process. Now, that's already after your resume has gotten past the applicant tracking system or the ATS. And that's a whole different ball of wax, which we'll talk to in a minute or two. So, um, if you remember nothing else from today's presentation, and you remember just this one thing, it will revolutionize your job search. There's only one person's opinion of your resume that matters, and it's not mine. It's not even yours. The only opinion of your resume that matters is the reader, which should be the hiring manager, because we should be networking into the job. And so sharing our resume with that hiring manager, and the hiring manager will then go back to HR and say, I need to formally interview this person, get them through the process, right? So if we can put ourselves in the shoes of that hiring authority, think like them, talk like them, act like them as much as possible, become that hiring authority, and then create all of our documentation, all of our answers to questions, everything we do as a part of our job search to speak directly to what that hiring authority needs to know. You will have done the best job you possibly can to get this job. So that's the most important thing that I can share with you, or hope that you can take from today's conversation. Anybody have any questions or thoughts on that? And I'm going to give you a quick example of that. Um, oh, crap. And now it just went out of my mind. So I'll come back to it if I think of it. So, what is my philosophy on resume writing? Well, the first thing is I don't really care about philosophy because that's not going to do much to get us a job. Okay, Judy, I see your question. How do you find out who the hiring manager is and what they want to know? That's a really great question, and it goes directly to what we discussed in one of our previous sessions this year about networking. Right? The more we can network into the organization, the better chance we have of identifying who that hiring manager is and then talking with them prior to interviewing. So, um, one of the things you can do, for example, is first you have to have the list of employers that you want to work for, and then go to everyone you know and everyone you meet and ask them, do you know someone who works at that company? And then reach out to the person that they know. If you go onto LinkedIn and you put the company name, do a search on the company name, That will then give you a list of all the people who currently work there or who have recently worked there in the past. And now you can see who are the people that you have a first or a second level connection to and reach out to them and start to talk to them and ask them for the names of the hiring manager in the department that you want to work for. Now, we can talk forever about the hiring manager and how to get them, the networking involved with that. Come back and talk to me at another time, and I can give you some more tips on that. So, my philosophy is really a short one when it comes to resume writing. If we're writing to the needs and wants of the hiring manager, that means we're going to be prioritizing the information to what's important to them. We're going to be creating information like our summary or our objective, which we'll talk more about why I hate those two words, in a way that speaks directly to why you are the best candidate for this job and no one can do the job better than you and the hiring manager needs to hire you. So you position yourself for the job, right? And then everybody gets caught up on length. And I got to tell you, it just doesn't matter. Now, I'm saying it doesn't matter. At this conference that I was at, there was a hiring manager doing a presentation on what you need to do to get hired by that company. And he said unequivocally, if your resume is more than one page, we are passing you by because we don't have the time to read it. So that's why we need to know the hiring manager and what their wants are, because there are those people who are going to say, I need a one-page resume from you. There are others who are going to say, you know what? I don't care if it's 5 or 10 pages. As long as the information that's there is valuable and important, I want to read it because I want to know who you are. So my take on it always is keep your resume as short as possible. Shorter is always better. But in the end, length doesn't really matter unless you come across someone who says, I need a one page, I need a 2 page resume, or whatever they come up with. And of course, the resume has to be keyword rich. So those are some overarching things to think about as you're writing your resume. Now, how can you talk act become someone you don't know? Well, that's a great question, Manuel. And the answer to that is, again, back to the networking. As I'm talking to other people in the organization, as I'm talking to that hiring manager at a point when they're not looking to hire someone, I'm getting to know them. They're getting to know me. And for example, if you were doing an informational meeting with the hiring manager, you could flat out ask, here's a copy of my resume. What do you like about it? What needs to change? What should I do? Excuse me, what should I do to make myself the most attractive candidate possible to you and your organization? And the people who are doing that level of networking, they're the people who are getting jobs quickly, rather than the people who seem to be out of work 9, 12, 18 months. And I'm seeing more and more of that these days. But the folks who are really engaged in networking, they're still getting jobs in 5 to 8 months. A little bit longer than last year, which was 3 to 6 months, but they're still getting jobs faster than those who are not networking. So maybe, we talk to Andrew and we have another session on networking if that's something that's of concern for you all. So here are some of the things that I like to do specific to how to write a good resume. Keep it short and simple. We don't need to use, the $64,000 words with 15 syllables in every single line on your resume. Where they're appropriate, certainly you want to use the jargon and the higher level words, but if simple language will do just as well to explain it and maybe even explain it better, use the simple language. That goes to making it both readable and understandable. So the three ables. I need to be able to read your resume easily. And one of the things that's difficult to read is big, long paragraphs of data. So if I can keep my bullets short, two, no more than 3 lines, if I can keep a paragraph to no more than 5 lines, it's easier. If I've got a list, if I can bulletize that list, it makes it easier and more readable for me to find the information that I'm looking for. And so the readability is about how can I, as the reader, find the information? And you need to make it easy for me to find. Understandable goes to the language that you're using. Make sure that your grammar is correct. I'll give you a couple of caveats to that. There is such a thing actually as resume grammar, believe it or not. And one of the differences between standard US English grammar and resume grammar is we can take out more often than not the words the, a, and an. Those conjunction words, I think that's what they're called, but those 3 words oftentimes remove it from the sentence and it does not change the meaning of the sentence at all. But it's fewer words and makes it easier to read for the person who's reading it. So wherever possible, try and eliminate those extra words. Understandable is also about the grammar of use a result statement followed by an action statement or an action statement followed by a result statement. And I'm going to come back and talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Now, scannable can be looked at 2 different ways. One option for scannable is it able to be read by the ATS? Can an ATS scan that resume and extract the data and put it where it belongs in the application? We're going to talk about that later on. In this case, scannable is also about as the human eye is looking at your resume, can they easily scan down the resume and see the things that are important to them? So that means, is there enough white space, but not too much? Are the headings separated in a good way that makes it easy to figure out where I'm at and what I'm reading? Am I splitting information from one page to another page? We don't want to have one job, for example, with the title and company name, et cetera, on and maybe one bullet on one page, and then the remaining 5 bullets on the next page. Because now if the resume gets separated, I have no clue what I'm reading, or I'm missing information that may be valuable. So we can't let those things happen. And that's kind of what we're talking about with scannable. So any questions on the 3 ables and the KISS? Content that changes minds is really all about positioning yourself for the role. So every single statement on your resume needs to in some way say, see, look, I'm the best at doing this job. Nobody's better at it. And in particular, that very first paragraph underneath your contact information that typically we would call an objective or a summary needs to be very powerful in talking about why you have your unique selling proposition and your unique value proposition. Right? So it needs to answer what job am I applying for and why am I the best at that job? Okay. Let's see, but if you're networking, you might not know what the job is. Exactly. And so what Jennifer's saying is, how can I use my resume in networking if I don't know what job I'm going for? And that's a great question, Jennifer. But again, it comes back to issues related to networking. I argue that you want to have a separate document you use in networking. Now, no matter what, whether you use what I call a marketing plan in networking or you use your resume, you still need some idea. I want to be an IT professional. I want to be in project management. I want to be in pharma scientific research, but I don't know exactly what space in there that I fit in. So put that right at the top of your resume. And I'll show you some sample resumes in a minute where you'll see where what I'd like to see you do is have your contact information. Right underneath your contact information, you're going to give me the title, the role, or the function that you want to perform as clearly identified as you can. Then you're going to have this positioning statement that talks about your value proposition and your unique selling position that says why I'm really good in whatever space I've mentioned right above. And then we go into proving everything that we've said so far. So I hope that helps answer your question, Jennifer. So underneath our position statement, the order of the information is whatever speaks best to your qualifications for the job. So it doesn't have to be your education first and then your uh, employment history, or it doesn't need to be your employment history and then your education. It could be that you have some key accomplishments that you list, or maybe specific certifications that prove you're qualified for the job. What you want to do is whatever information you're going to put on your resume, you always want that information listed in the order that's most important to the reader. And, if we're applying to a job, we should have some sense of what the reader is going to be interested in knowing about us. And so we can reprioritize and organize the information. We need to always talk about accomplishments on our resume. So all of our bullets need to be accomplishments based, not duties or responsibilities based. In fact, one of the words that you never want to put on your resume is responsibilities or responsible for, because it's meaningless. Give me an action. Tell me what you did, what you accomplished. It's far more valuable. Now, I know I'm talking about a lot of these things as if they're rules, but they're really not. They're best practices. And so you're going to do what's right and best for you. But I think if you use some of these best practices, you'll create a far better resume. We want to talk about our expertise and not our experience. And I see a lot of people who like to use nouns. And let me think if I could come up with one. So, na responsible for the navigation of. Oh, I navigated ABC, right? Take that, any word that ends in tion, you can make that into a verb. And that's the word you should be using in your resume to make it a results and accomplishments based statement. Questions here. So I hope a lot of you have heard of the STAR format of storytelling, right? It stands for situation, task, action, results. You may have heard it called SOAR, situation, objective, action, results. Some people still use the simpler versions of CAR or PAR, challenge, action, results, problem, action, results. We always want to tell our stories in interviewing and networking in this format because it's a much more powerful storytelling format. So if you've done a good job of creating your stories, what we want to do on the resume is take the A and the R, the actions and the results, and turn that into a statement that we can put on the resume. Here's a specific example from a client of mine. She had on her resume 4 words as a bullet under one of her jobs: experience with access databases. Now, after I got her to tell me the whole story behind that, and then I re-summarized it for her into a 2-minute STAR story, we changed the bullet on her resume from those 4 words to say, saved the company $1.5 million annually. There's the result by, here's the action, creating a 100 field access database with 25 micro programs analyzing the data. Now, who would you want to hire? Experience with access databases or save the company 1.5 million? Most people would probably want to hire the second. So create your star stories. Make sure they're metrics based, that they've got good measurable results, and then take those results, put that on your resume along with the primary action that took place to get that result. Another way of doing it might be action followed by results. And one that I would put on my resume would be um, coached more than 500 people in successful job search techniques, resulting in an 87% hire rate by using the methodology I created. Sounds pretty good. That's somebody that I might want to hire into my career services department, right? So they're results driven, they're quantifiable, they're action oriented, and then where we can put a lot of keywords, this is a great place to put those keywords. This is a really powerful point. So does anybody have any questions here? I'll give you a moment just to type in while I take a drink. Okay, so another place people try and get hung up on their resume is what format to use. And there are really 3 different primary types of resume. Okay, let's take a second here. Lynn is asking, what if you're in the service industry and not so easy to measure? Okay, so number 1, there's always measurements. We need to just identify what they are. If your organization is not tracking the metrics, you want to try and do some tracking of your own. But even without having pure data, in today's environment, we can create or make up realistic numbers that would be appropriate. Now, you need to be able to talk through your star stories to convince the listener that your statistics are real. So you can't just make stuff up and not be able to back it up in some way. Right? But for example, if you're in a service industry, um, you know, 7 out of 10 customers report that they were pleased with the customer service I provided. Right? And then if you have 3 or 4 stories that you can share of customers that were really happy with the service you provided, you've backed that up. You've proven to me that that's probably a realistic number. Now, if you came to me and said 98% of all of my customers are satisfied at the end of our conversation, I'd say you're full of crap. And so I'm going to drill down on you and ask you more questions to try and prove that out and have you do more examples of what your customer service looks like in order to see if I can believe that statistic, right? But if it's a high enough number that's on the high side of what that company would expect you to do, and you can back it up with some stories, they'll believe you. Sometimes we don't have visibility into the metrics. That's true. And that's where when you're doing your annual reviews, ask the boss for those numbers. You want to see, how am I doing and how am I doing compared to the other people in the department? So ask them for those metrics. And if they won't give them to you, start tracking the metrics as much and as best as you can. So it's not a perfect thing, I know, And sometimes we're like, oh crap, I should have been doing that for the last 3 years or 5 years. Well, you do it now, and at least you're getting started and you have information to go forward. Okay, I'm going to come back to the chronological question in just a second. Getting lots of stuff typing in here. I love it. Um, this is interesting. I like to finish watching. Okay. So Andrew, Kathy Bragger was hoping you'll be able to send a copy of this out to her. Using KPIs or OKRs is a good practice for a resume. Would that improve the resume or make it more complex and less understandable? No, Manuel, that's exactly what I'm saying is you want to be using those KPIs in your resume, absolutely. And when we look at some of the examples in just a minute, I'll show you how that works. Okay, beautiful. So let me talk about the differences between the different resumes, and then we'll see if this question is answered about chronological resumes. Okay, so most of us probably learned how to create a chronological resume. It's the one that's reverse date order, starting with um, your most recent employment to your oldest employment, and then your education, and everything is in a prescribed format. And there is a time and a place where that's really helpful and useful. Oftentimes, HR is the department that loves that chronological resume because it helps them to find all the information that they're looking for, and they know just where to go and get it, and they can then use that to make the check mark. Yep, you meet this requirement. No, you don't. It's basically being used by HR as a way of disqualifying you for the job. So KPI stands for key performance indicator, looking at the Q&A, and key performance indicators would be the metrics that you're being held to, the standards that you're being held to in your job. So if we have talked to the hiring manager and they have said they really want to see a chronological resume, well, that's what you're going to provide. Probably if you're going after an HR role, you're going to want to provide a chronological resume or something similar to it. I'm not a big fan of chronological resumes. Now, managers love the functional resume. And the functional resume isn't so much based on your history and meeting all of those benchmarks and time requirements. It's more about your skills. Do you have the skills and the competencies and the knowledge necessary to do the job? And so, quite often, in a functional resume, it's going to have all of those bullets that would normally be under your job up top on the resume. And you're going to say, I can meet this skill, I can meet this requirement, I can do this competency. And you're going to list all of those things out. And then underneath that, in maybe one line, you're going to have your title, your company name, and the dates you worked there for your employment history. So it's a very different way of formatting a resume. Managers love it because they see right up front, you can do what I need you to do. I want to talk to you. HR hates it because they don't know to see where you meet the skills. They don't see where you meet the time requirements, right? And so different purposes of reading the resume, different formats work. Now, unfortunately, we can't submit one resume to the ATS for the HR department to review and then submit a second resume for the hiring manager to review, right? And so we need to do more often than not, what I'm seeing working best is a combination or hybrid resume that takes a little bit of the best of both and puts it together in one document. So we're going to look at each of these in just a second here, and I'll show you some of the differences in them. What is the best way to address a gap in your career? Let's come back to that question in just a second, but I think I've answered the other one about uh, is it an automatic signal that the applicant is old? So no, not really. People are using that at different times as well. Okay, so let's look at some formatting issues that we need to think about with all of our resumes. First off, we really need at least a half-inch margin all the way around the paper. And it was interesting. I never heard it put this way before, but the presenter at this other conference last week said this way: if I'm holding the piece of paper and your margin is not at least a half an inch, my finger is covering information, right? And we don't want the information to be covered. So you want to have at least a half an inch. An inch is preferred because it's more pleasing to the eye. Most people today prefer a sans serif formatted font type like Calibri or Arial, Garamond, something like those. Times New Roman is considered old-fashioned, and that's got all the little doohickeys on the bottom and the ends of all the letters, right? And that's the serif. We don't want to have those anymore. So use a simplified font because we're doing so much reading online and so much reading is emails, and all of that text is often in Arial or Calabria or something like that. Our eyes now are trained more to read it. Times New Roman was more popular when most of our reading was books, paper books, or the newspaper. And newspapers were all in that format as well. So we need to look at a different font. I find that it's easier to read something that's left justified rather than center justified, where the margins all line up and the words are differently spaced in between. That's center justified. I'd rather it be left justified. So the left margin is a straight line and the right margin is jagged based on where the words end. If you have any spelling mistakes or any grammar mistakes other than taking out the, a, and an, it's going to be held against you. So have your resume read by as many people as possible and identify as many mistakes as possible. And don't count on just Grammarly or Microsoft's spelling, word spelling programs to catch all of the grammar. They catch a lot, catch a whole lot, but they may miss something. Or they may use the wrong spelling of a word that's pronounced the same way but spelled differently. There and there and there, right? Their, There, and They apostrophe re. Those programs may not get the correct version of that word in your resume, so you need to have other people look at it as well. I think it's valuable to judiciously use bolding and underlining. And I mean judiciously. No more than about 10% of your resume should be in bold or underlined or the combination of the two. But what bolding and underline will do is force my eye as the reader to go to that information you most want and need to for me to see. So put it in bold. Let me see it. Especially if you're going to be putting this resume through an applicant tracking system, um, to a lesser extent these days, but to some extent still, different software programs will reformat a table and so it won't look right. So oftentimes we recommend still that you use tabs to create the appearance of a table, bulleted items in several columns rather than using a table. And whenever you're sending your resume, always put your name in the document. either your first initial dot last name or your full name, but somehow include your name in the document title so that when I see the document come in, I know what I'm looking at. I like to say P. Cecala resume for and the company name because I'm adjusting my resume to every job that I've applied to. And so now by putting my name with it, you know whose resume you're looking at. By putting your name with it, I know who I sent it to, and it makes it easier for tracking the information. Do you include a picture of yourself? Lynn, that's a very common thing to do in Europe. It's not so common here in the United States. However, that can be changing, and it will depend to some extent on the industry that you're applying to. For example, if you're going to be the public face of an organization, say their PR person, they may want to see a picture of you on your resume. But as a general rule, I say no, you don't want to include it. So we're going to come back, Elise, in just a moment and talk about the ATS format. And I'll show you what I think is the best format for that in just a moment. Okay, now let's start looking at some of these resumes and I'll get at the contact information as a part of that. So here's a sample chronological resume. Now, in all cases, what we'll want to do is use our full name. This is actually old school to put our complete address. We don't want to do that anymore. We only want to put the city and the state for where we're located. And no longer do you need to use multiple phone numbers. You want to put only the phone number you are most likely to answer. Where do you want me to contact you? And your email address. You probably also want to include your LinkedIn profile address. And I think one of my other examples shows some of those things. But you can see here how everything is done. This is still so old school. It's in Times New Roman, right? And notice though here, wherever possible, I'm trying to get all of the information about the company and the job on one line and then just the bullets underneath it. Also notice the use of the bolding. So we've got our position statement. I would prefer to take out the word objective. And actually what I'd like to see you put there is the title of the job you're applying for. That way, when I'm reading your resume, I know exactly why I'm reading your resume. So this is a good example of a lot of things not to do in a resume these days. Okay, here's a functional resume. Notice the difference. All of my bullets are under functional headings. There's no bullets under my experience. And that's the primary difference between these two resumes. So now here's a more modern combination resume. And notice we've got the location, we've got the phone number, we've got the email address, and then the title of the job that they're applying for. With a quick little paragraph, 4 or 5 sentences that says why I'm the right person for this job. And then some key accomplishments based on the research that I can do, my leadership skills, my interpersonal skills, my project management skills, right? And then I've got my history, but I'm still putting some bullets underneath the work history where that's helpful and additional information. I even describe some of the things that I did in my education that's of value to the reader. And in this case, we added a volunteer experience because it was something that, again, adds more value to the resume. These call out boxes are hiding it, but you see the phone number here. Also up here, you'll see behind this call out box, the person's name, and behind this box, page 2 of 2, so that you can see, you know that if these two pages get separated, we're looking at, whose resume are we looking at? So these are just some things to think about in how you can take a functional resume and a chronological resume and combine them into one. Now, if my master's degree in education was more important than my work experience, I would absolutely put that before work experience. I might even put it before my key accomplishments if that's more important than my key accomplishments. It doesn't matter what order the information is in. What matters is that it's in the order that's going to work best for you or for the reader, sorry. So now let's talk about those ATS resumes. Generally, what I like to do is create this nice fancy resume with all of the great formatting that looks so beautiful. And I'm going to save that as a Word document. I might save it as a PDF. And that's what I'm going to email to the hiring manager. I'm going to attach that at the end of the application process with the ATS. I'm going to attach this resume to the ATS. But at the beginning, I'm going to use a completely different resume that's absolutely more scannable. And typically what that means is I take this resume and I save it in plain text format. That means save it as a .txt. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. What this does, though, is it takes out all of the special formatting that you put into the fancy resume. This way, all you have is the raw data. We can set apart the keywords with white space or additional lines so that they are more identifiable. It's going to simplify all of the text. It's going to simplify our bullets. We need to use just plain text, and we need to use just a simple bullet or an asterisk for the bullets. And that's what will translate best in the electronic or the plain text version. These check marks are going to come out looking like nonsense if we were to save this in a plain text. We're not going to use the header or the footer of the page, and we're not going to use boxes or shading because the resume reader attached to most ATSs can't handle any of this formatting stuff. And so we need to make it simple. Lists that are separated by tabs and not commas. Right? And so we're going to save it as a TXT. You could save it in rich text format or RTF as well. So this is what it's going to look like. Now, it's not going to immediately look this simplified. We may have John Jones with the address and the contact information all across the one line. So we don't want that to stay that way. We're going to create a separate line for each item. And in this version of the resume, we need your complete address. Because what's the value to this resume? The goal of a scannable resume is to pre-populate, fill out for you all of the application blanks in the ATS. So you need to provide on this scannable resume all the information that the ATS is looking for, and you need to do it in the format or in the order that the ATS is looking for it, that the application wants it, right? So the application is first going to want your name, then they're going to want your name, your address, then they're going to probably want your phone number, and then probably after that, they'll want your email address. So put the information in that order, it'll populate into the boxes properly. It will likely just ignore these pieces of information, but if there's a space for it in the resume or in the application, they'll add it in there. Whoops, sorry. Then we're going to go down to the experience. And typically, the ATS wants your title first, then the company name, and then the dates that you worked there. Sometimes it may want the location, so you'll need to add that in as well. So I'm putting the information in that order. For your education, it's going to want to know your degree. It's going to want to know the name of the university. It's going to want to know the location of the university, oftentimes the address, and it's going to want to know the date that you graduated. So you need to put that information in there, right? But we're putting everything in the order that the application is asking for it. So if you find that when you upload at the beginning of the process your resume to an ATS, and then you have to go back and cut and paste or move around or redefine what's in each of the fields, that's because the resume you uploaded did not have the information in the correct order for that resume. Or I'm sorry, that application. So now change the format of your resume to meet that application and then upload it. And you'll see that it makes it much faster and easier to get it into the ATS. So Manuel, specifically again, just to answer that question to make sure I did, in terms of contact information, your name, the location where you live, city and state, nothing more is needed. You may not even need to include that. The phone number that is the best phone number for me to contact you, your email address. Again, the email you are most likely to answer, but it also needs to be a professional email address. I used to have an email address, njflyboy@aol.com. Well, I no longer use that at all, but I would never put that on a resume. On my resume, I'm going to put paul.cecala@gmail.com. So use a good current resume. And then, of course, your LinkedIn address. But if you're going to put your LinkedIn address, you want to make sure you've gone into LinkedIn and used the shortened version that will be just http colon backspace or backslash linkedin.com/in/your name. So you need to actually format that in LinkedIn and change it in your profile. Once you've done that, you're good. Now, you're right, the ATS may not accept, Alex, the symbols like the colon and the ampersand and those things. And so you may not be able to put your LinkedIn address on the scannable resume. However, as these things have become more common, they've been updating the ATSs so that they can accept more of those things. So that's becoming easier at this point. It's not all throughout, and we don't know which system the employer is using. So the system they use may not accept those special characters, whereas the system another employer uses does. So best to keep them out whenever you can. Good point. Thank you. So running up right on time here. These are some of the things that I think are the most important things to remember about resume writing. But again, if you remember nothing else, there's only best practices. There are no rules. And everything you do needs to be done for the hiring manager's purpose. So think about who the hiring manager is and what they want in your resume and your brand, your entire brand. Any last questions from anyone? Is it possible to acquire a certificate of participation for this webinar? That's I'll leave up to Andrew. And this is my most recent book. A lot of this information is in the book. It's available on Amazon for $20, or you can reach out to me and I can get it to you directly. It's 20 worksheets on how to do a job search. And that's what I think most people really appreciate. Everyone has told me they love that it's all worksheets that they can fill out. I am very common with running groups designed to assist job seekers, and this is a list of some of the groups that I facilitate. If you're interested, please let me know, and I will be happy to get you connected to those groups. And while I answer some questions, there's my contact information. Um, how to address the gaps on resume. Thank you, Elise. Yes. So in most cases, if it's only 6 months to a year, I'm probably not going to address it directly. If it's longer than that, then I'm going to want to address it by showing something that I've done that's productive and valuable. Now, it could be, you know, you put it in there, took time off to care for family, right? Oh, a great one would be, you know, took these courses, right? Took a gap to get additional education. And then in your education section, you're showing by date the education that you got during that period of time. Um, that question can be a lot more nuanced to answer than what is easily able to do in a presentation like this. But if it's more than a year, you need to put something in your resume to address it. If it's less than a year, I generally don't worry about it because most people are taking 6 to 12 months to find a job these days. Should I always attach a cover letter for jobs I apply for? And how much time budget? Boy, Alex, you're asking really great questions in terms of how much time to budget for doing applications and cover letters. So when it comes to cover letters, my thoughts are two. If the employer asks for it, you damn well better provide it. If they absolutely say, I don't want it, you damn well better not provide it. Follow the instructions that the employer gives you. If they don't give instruction, I suggest including a cover letter because that cover letter could be that piece that takes you over the top compared to another candidate. If they read it, great. If they don't, oh well, what did you lose? Some time in creating it. Now, in terms of time on applications, if you're doing what I strongly, strongly recommend, and by the way, statistically, 80% of people, according to the US Department of Labor and the New Jersey Department of Labor, 80% of people found their job by talking to someone else, whether it's going directly to the hiring manager or networking into a job. They've spoken to another human being in order to get access to that job. And usually they've spoken to that person before the hiring manager had an opening so that you become the known candidate, the known quantity that they want to hire. And when there's a job opening, they immediately call you to get into that job. That's why we need to always be networking. If you're doing an online job search, I would say you should have a master resume and maybe a primary cover letter that's got a whole bunch of information in it. And you just are cutting and pasting out of those documents into the document you're going to send to this employer so that you shouldn't have to spend more than about an hour per application customizing to that application. But if you're doing all the networking that I'm suggesting, I would say to you, you only want to spend 10% of your job search time doing online applications because they're only 10% successful. And you want to spend 10 to 15% of your time talking to recruiters because about 10 to 15% of the time people using recruiters get a job and spend the rest of your time networking and talking to people in the company you want to work for because that's where you're going to get the greatest success. Andrew, I can go for about another 15 minutes or so if you're okay with continuing to answer some more of these questions.
That's fine.
Okay. Any thoughts on the use of graphics or color? So that's becoming more and more common these days to use some shaded boxes, to use some graphics, to use some color, to use lines on your resume. What I say to this is, yeah, go ahead and do it, but make sure that's what the reader wants. Because if you send me, let me rephrase that. If you apply to, say, JP Morgan Bank, and you've got this fancy resume with all these graphics and this beautiful design to it, and you're applying to a banker who still wears a shirt and tie and a three-piece suit and wingtip shoes to the office, they're going to look at that resume and say, what the hell is this shit? Oops, sorry. But you need to send to the employer what they want. So more and more employers today are looking for something that's a little more eye appealing and has a little more diversity to it. And so using those things is becoming more popular and more appropriate. But again, you got to know what the boss wants and send what they want. Yes, Manuel, finding a job is a full-time job. Let's see, is that everything or did I miss something?
Um,
Gmail, send you certificate. Go ahead.
I I tried to make my own resume a one pager using a two-column page. I'm guessing this is not good practice, and not ATS readable.
Definitely not ATS readable. Um, it can be a good practice for the resume that you give to someone or that you email to someone directly. Because again, it's a little bit fancier, a little bit more eye appealing. And so it's becoming more appropriate and more popular to do that. Uh, but no, not for an ATS. What else did I miss?
Is there really a point in trying to hide your age using a functional resume? I suppose it gives you a better chance to make it to the interview.
Okay. So a lot of people do feel that using a functional resume will be hiding your age. The truth is, at this point, don't bother trying because they're going to find so many other ways of figuring out who you are and what your age is that it's just not worth bothering anymore. You know, go to my LinkedIn profile and you're going to see when I graduated college. You know, talk to a friend of mine that you know in the industry, and you're going to get information about how old I am. You know, if you have a LinkedIn profile, the picture on it's got to be pretty close to who you are today, because if that picture doesn't match what shows up in the office, they're going to fire you before you start. So you, it's more and more difficult to hide your age. It's just not worth it. Plus, if the company doesn't want you because you're either too old or too young, you don't want to work there anyway because you're not going to be happy. So, what most career coaches have come to, and most HR departments are saying at this point, it's not worth the time and energy to put into it. If you are concerned about age discrimination, AARP has some tremendous resources. I also have a list of other resources that I can share with you that can help you to find A, companies that want to hire people who've got a lot of experience, or B, companies who do not discriminate by age and they're very clear about not using age discriminating practices. Did I miss anything else? Remote work. Do you consider easy to apply? Um, should we instead invest more to investigate? All right, so look, Alex, remote work is becoming more and more difficult to find. Every day I'm hearing from clients and contacts of mine that employers are going back to at least a hybrid work environment where I'm going to be required to spend 2 or 3 days a week in the office. That doesn't mean remote jobs don't exist. They do, but they're more and more difficult to find. So I would suggest networking to find out if the employer wants to do remote work or is willing to do remote work, or maybe remote work is allowed today, but you know, the scuttlebutt is come January 1, we're going to be full time in the office. So do your homework before you apply. Uh, Job boards, let's say right now, LinkedIn seems to be the most popular place and the most successful place to find a job by using a job board. Indeed is probably the next best. But again, you're still only getting, depending on your industry, somewhere between a 7% success rate if you're in a non-technology based industry to as much as a 12% success rate if you are in a technology based role. So I would not spend a lot of time online. There's not a lot of value to it. You're not going to get the success you want. Anything else did I miss?
Not that I can see, but we can give it another minute just to see if anything
Okay.
comes in.
All right. And again, I'm going to put my contact information. Hope this says host and panelists only. Hopefully everybody gets to see that, Andrew. But uh, my contact information is in the chat. Um, and if anybody needs, I can share my screen again and put that slide back up that has my contact information in it. So I'm going to ask two questions of you all. Can we reach out to you or send a resume your way for feedback? Elise, I'd be happy for you to reach out to me. And that's brings me to a great point. My first conversation with anybody is at no cost to see if there's opportunity for us to work together. So, by all means, I'm happy to have a 1 hour conversation with anyone. Secondly, I always offer to everyone, and no one ever takes me up on it. If you have a quick question or you want me to do a quick review of your resume, and I'm going to spend no more than 10 or 15 minutes of my time, I am happy to have that answer and that question from you all the time. So you can call me as often as you want or reach out as often as you want for that quick response. If you need more than a quick response, I'm going to tell you, and then I'll give you the quick response. But then if you want, we can set up a time for a longer response. Do you recommend staying away from applying for federal jobs? Veronica, that's up to you. Um, you know, the as we all know, the federal government is undergoing all kinds of craziness these days. And who knows what tomorrow is going to bring, because it seems that the current administration changes their mind as often as the wind blows. And so, what may be a great place today may not be tomorrow. Now, I think there are some federal roles that are going to always be pretty good and pretty stable, like air traffic control. You only have to worry about when Congress decides to shut down the government. But you need to think about the stability because the government jobs are not, especially under this administration, as stable as they once were. Um, State and local government, still pretty stable roles and still pretty good places to work. Benefits are still pretty good. I'll let Andrew agree or disagree. But you know, getting into a state or a local community job or municipal job is in a good place generally. So I'd love
All
for
right.
people to give me quick answers to this one question. What's the number one thing you're taking away from today's conversation? And if at least two or three or four of you would pop in to the chat, what is the thing that you're most taking away from today's conversation? I'd appreciate it. Formatting for the ATS. Thank you, Jennifer. Anybody else want to pop something in there? This also helps me to know that I did a good job speaking to the manager and being simple and concise. Great. The font change. Good. New York's time being old. The KISS method. Great. Beautiful. Well, folks, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for listening and for your participation. And I hope to hear from you all at some point. I look forward to working with you. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you for everybody attending today. This program is being recorded, so in case you missed anything or you want to go back and And hear this again, a link will be sent out to everybody who registered for the program. So be on the lookout for that. I'd like to say again, everybody be safe, be well, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Bye all.